All right, so good morning. Thank you all so much for joining us for the first of our teaching career preparation skills sessions. My name is Samantha Jackson. I am a career readiness consultant here at Kent ISD, and super excited to have you all joining us this morning. So just a really quick couple of housekeeping items before I introduce our co-facilitator for the day. So for those who aren't familiar with Kent ISD, I know we have a few other folks in the room from other districts, which is totally cool. So happy to have you. But just for those who don't know what Kent ISD Career Readiness Department does, we have 4 career readiness consultants, and we work with all of the schools within the Kent ISD area. So on the left, I know it's kind of a long list. You will get a copy of this PowerPoint, and this is all on our website as well. But each of our consultants works with specific school districts within the county. So on the top there, you've got your kind of traditional LEAs. On the bottom, we have our public charter schools. If you're in Kent County and you don't see your name on this list, we do absolutely support you as well. So if you're at one of our parochial schools, or if you're at one of the virtual schools, please feel free to reach out to me. We're super happy to help. If you're not within Kent ISD, we're also super happy to connect with you. So if you have questions or want some resources, we're definitely happy to share those as well. So what we do, we provide professional development like this. So, both regionally as well as within districts and specific schools. We provide a lot of support on EDP implementation. So whether that is helping with your platform like Zello, Naviance, Maven, any of those platforms, or helping you figure out exactly how you want to do those lessons with your students. Our main goal, though, is really engaging in K-12 career readiness planning. So, helping schools think through how they can incorporate career readiness into the full academic spectrum from kindergarten until the end of high school. And really our goal is to help make sure that every student leaves high school with an informed plan. We also help with connecting to employers. So things like bringing in guest speakers, panels, career fairs, taking students out on industry tours, and then also help develop career readiness resources. So I'll be sharing some throughout today. And those types of things, we're happy to either curate, find things that are already available, or create things for you if there's not something that meets your specific need. A couple of housekeeping items for today. If you signed up to get sketches, if you registered, there's nothing else that you need to do. You don't have to fill out a survey or anything. Just make sure that your name on Zoom matches, or at least somewhat matches, your name that you registered with, so that we can make sure we get you credit for that. You will get a copy of this recording and the PowerPoint after today. And I think that's it. So now I'm going to turn it over here. So super excited today to be joined by Nikki Joyner, who is a senior recruiter and is going to just share from her experience a little bit about recruiting and resumes, how to help students stand out. We also realize that some of this information might be specifically geared towards students that are planning to go to college, but really most of it is applicable to all students applying for all jobs. Just wanted you to get it straight from a recruiter to hear some kind of best practices, and then we'll end with some kind of like implementation application for K-12. So super excited to have Nikki join us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Samantha. I appreciate it. Hey folks, my name is Nikki Joyner. I am coming at you live from Dallas, Texas this morning, where I live and work. I am a early careers team member at a Fortune 20 company by day and a public speaker by night. So I am here to marry my 2 passions with you today and talk about the landscape of how to get students hired. whether they are going to college and being hired with a college degree, or whether they are going out into the workforce directly after their senior year, and they're entering the workforce in an area of interest for them. I'm going to give you all the tips, all the tricks, all the things that you want to consider. And I'm going to do so from my vantage point as a day in and day out person who does do recruiting. So I want to give you just kind of a landscape of how we're going to spend our time today. We've got 4 main areas. We're going to talk about the shift in the application process, particularly within the past 5 or 6 years. We are going to talk all things resume, what to let students know that they should be doing, what to avoid, and why. We're going to be talking about interviewing, one-way interviewing, two-way interviewing, virtual interviewing, in-person interviewing, all the things. And then we're going to go over some LinkedIn optimization. So if you are able to see the screen here, you will see that each of these numbers are associated with a reaction emoji that you have at the bottom of your screen. I am curious if you want to correlate the reaction emoji that is most closely aligned with the one that you want to spend the most time on, the one that you're like, oh yes, I came here for that today. Or, oh, I have lots of questions about LinkedIn or lots of questions about resumes. Go ahead and leverage that reaction emoji at the bottom for me. Okay, excellent. I see some celebrations. Great. Resumes, interviewing. Great, great, great. This is awesome, y'all. Thank you so much. All right. So let's dive right into it. We are going to gloss over this application process. Here's what I want you to know. As we consider the ways in which students are applying, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One, our application process, largely online. Going to be for any company that you work with, going to be largely online. So it's really important that as we're coaching students, that they have their materials ready and steady to go in an online environment. That looks like a Word copy of their resume. That looks like a PDF copy of their resume, a cover letter if it's required, mostly not required, though we'll get into that momentarily. And we also want to keep in mind around the ways in which they can be contacted online. So because the application process is online, that means we're vetting candidates online. That means we're sourcing for candidates online. So as students are going into that adult phase, leaving high school, they've got to get rid of their barbiegirl72@gmail.com email address. It's got to go. So instruct them that they should be using another email address. I recommend a personal email, one that they have access to long-term, a nikki.joiner@gmail.com or a joinernikki1@gmail.com is fine. But you would be pleasantly surprised of the amount of candidates, particularly candidates coming from high school that we see interested in our firm that still have their barbiegirl72@gmail.com. So we want to make sure that we position them for success because this is an online market. Now, LinkedIn is a very popular platform. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on that towards the end of the presentation, but there are also others, particularly if you're working with students who are going into the college or university setting. All colleges and universities have their own career platform. About 75% of colleges and universities are working with a platform called Handshake. It's all one word, Handshake. They should absolutely fill out a profile there. They're going to get the information well before they start school and probably when they're still with you if you're working with them in their senior year. There's also some other platforms out there. Jopwell, Jopwell, and HBCU Connect are the other big ones. So if you're working with students that are going to a historically Black college or university, they will probably be on HBCU Connect or Jopwell. And again, those are going to be platforms that they're going to put their profile information, their demographic information, a picture, their major, if they know what it is, they're going to upload those things. And that's how recruiters are going to find them. That's largely how they're going to find jobs. Now, if you are working with students who are not going to college and they're interested in entering the workforce right away, I would recommend LinkedIn. I would also recommend Workday is another one. Indeed is another one. And Monster is another one. So again, just depending on what the candidate profile is of the student that you're working with, regardless of if they are attending college or university or not, they need to be on something because the days of applications where you go in and fill it out on some sort of piece of paper are gone. In fact, they just did a recent study and 98% of folks that are hiring for jobs are no longer doing any sort of paper anything, and that includes onboarding. So we really want to make sure that we set the students up for success. Now, when they are setting their profile up, they're going to get some information, or they're going to be asked some information, and one of those is around work authorization. So lots of things to consider. One, work authorization for candidates can change time after time. So depending on the demographic of students that you're working with within your school right now, they may be on some sort of visa, their family may be on some sort of visa. So you just want to make sure that if students have questions around work authorization, that they connect with someone in their life that would be able to answer those if that person is not you. I have been in a lot of not so nice situations where I've actually had to rescind offers from for candidates because their work authorization was inaccurate on their application. So as students, especially students that are going out into the college and university market, we really want to instruct them to work with their career centers to make sure that they get what they need. Now, largely with the demographic of high school students, there's going to be two things, or two different types of programs, or two different types of jobs they're going to be able to hire into. It's going to be like a cohorted based experience, and then a onesie twosie job. So a cohorted based experience is going to be, I got an internship at Amazon, and I'm going to be interning with 30 other freshmen or sophomore students at the Chicago office. We're all going to be doing the same things together. We're going to be in a cohorted experience. Those are typically going to be called programs on an application. So if you're helping students navigate that, it's going to be a program. Now, the onesie twosie jobs, those are going to be, I want to be a teller at Chase Bank, or I'm interested in being an associate at Target. Those are going to be the onesie twosie jobs where they get hired in order to do those things. And they'll probably start on just a random day. They'll have an onboarding with a manager. So there are pros and cons to both. I want to be clear. I don't think one is better than the other. But a lot of times what we see in the application process is students are like, oh, I'm not interested in a program, so I'm not going to apply to this job. When in fact, this job is actually a program. They typically get paid for them, so they're not like unpaid or anything, but just something to keep in mind for the application process. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the applicant tracking system. Many of our folks who are hiring for jobs are using what's called an applicant tracking system. I want you to think about it like a digital filing cabinet. So the ways in which students are putting in their application materials are going directly into like this virtual hub. And in turn, the people on the recruiting team, like me, are able to go through that and look through the candidate's information. Now, typically when they put their information in, they're also going into like a hub to get more information. So that's how the companies and even universities will connect with them further about further opportunity. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage. The reason that I like to talk about this at the beginning is because I think a lot of times the correlation between online application process and online presence is not always there, particularly in my experience. So we definitely want to make sure that we prepare students in order to be really successful in the online environment, which means being really cognizant and aware of their digital footprint. So let's dive right into resumes. I'm going to give you my resume as an example here. So if you are able to see my screen, you will be able to see a copy of my resume, like the top half of my resume. And then I'm going to go through some tangible tips to consider as you are coaching students to build their resume. Now, resume could be for a scholarship. It could be to get into college or university. It could be for a job. It could be for some sort of position that they're looking for that's volunteer related. So resume could be for lots of different things. And ultimately, you want to curate the resume for whatever you are applying to. The first thing that I would recommend is, as you are working with students, ask them to create a running resume. And what I mean by a running resume, sometimes people refer to this as a CV or a curriculum vitae. That is the how many ever pages of things that they have that they could put into a resume. From there, they can then create specific resumes for specific things, i.e., here's my resume for scholarships. Here's my resume for jobs. Here's my resume for college, because some things may be on one that might not necessarily be on another. So that'd be my first recommendation. Let's go through some of the pieces on my resume, and I'm going to highlight some of the things that I would encourage you to think about as you're coaching students through this. The first is their contact information on the right-hand side. On this resume, mine appears on the right-hand side. Typically, it's on the right-hand side or in the center right after the name. A couple of things to consider. If a student does not have a LinkedIn profile or some sort of online profile in the networking space, I want to preference in the networking space, not Instagram, not Facebook. They should be putting it on their resume. Hyperlink is totally fine, or there's a short link that they can use. You also want to make sure that they put in some sort of, again, personal email address that is not barbiegirl72@gmail.com and their cell phone number. Now, if you recognize that there might be something missing from my online contact information, go ahead and drop it in the chat for me. If you're like, oh, I thought that there might be something else in your contact information that's not listed, go ahead and drop it in the chat for me. Yes, no address. Thank you. Thank you. There's no address. That's purposeful. I would recommend that you encourage students not to put their physical address on their resume. A couple of reasons. One, they are now going into an applicant tracking system, which means they're in the World Wide Web. So their address is, again, in a private, secure space, but we all know that things can happen. So that's the first thing I'd recommend. Second thing is employers will use this in order to determine a candidate's eligibility, specifically for a job. So if you're working with students and they're interested in getting an internship in Chicago, but they go to school in Michigan and they have their Michigan address, the employer might look at their address and say, oh no, we're looking for students in Chicago. But if the address isn't on there, then they can't use it in order to make a decision or fill in the blank for the candidate. So I definitely recommend that. The third one, which is really more prevalent when we think about like lateral, more experienced roles, but I did just want to highlight it for folks on this team, is zip codes are typically associated with things like a value of a home or a median household income or something similar. So if I had a zip code of 44457 and a recruiter looked up the zip code 44457 and saw that, let's say, the median household income was $72,000 and I'm applying for a position that is $150,000, they're likely to lowball me based upon where I live. So we just want to prioritize making sure that we set people up with the most success possible. So just keep that address off the resume. I like to say your digital address is your LinkedIn profile. So definitely leverage that instead. I would recommend it. Let's talk about the page limit. You should absolutely be, when you are working with high school students, their resume should be no longer than 1 page. I cannot tell you the amount of students that I see, especially in the college and university space, where their resumes are like 2-3 pages. We don't even have people who have 20 years of experience that have 2-3 page resumes. Again, resume different than curriculum vitae. So as we think about the page limit, you want to encourage them for 1 page. If they have that curriculum vitae or that CV that is multiple pages, absolutely. That's why we slice and dice and copy and paste for the things that we need. It's a good running resume for them to have. I see a lot of candidates also have like an objective statement in their resume. I would actually advise students against this. When we think about the resume, we want to think about it in the form of like real estate. Okay. So if I go into your home and you are spending a ton of time, let's say telling me to take my shoes off, or telling me that you want me to take my shoes off, I now do not have enough time to be able to experience the rest of your home because you've told me exactly what your objective is, i.e. take your shoes off. So when we think about the objective, it's really like I'd always tell students this, it's a duh moment, right? If you are giving me your resume for a particular job and your objective is to get that job, it is a duh moment for me. So instead of using the real estate on your resume for the objective, I want to obtain gainful employment where I can exercise my skills, I may recommend some sort of summary objective instead. Now there's an example here on my resume. You can do it one of 2 ways, first person or third person. Mine is in third person. So when we're doing the objective, we're focusing on I want to. When we're doing on the summary, we're actually focusing on here's my value add. Here is my summary of experiences. Here is my summary of things that I can add value to, whether it's by college or university, job, internship, a scholarship, whatever it might be. So I would recommend moving away from the objective and into the summary. Now, there's a couple of different resume sections. The one that is going to be most prevalent to obtain a job is work experience. Now, the one that's going to be most prevalent to obtain entry into college or university is going to be leadership and academic experience. The one thing that's going to be most prevalent for a scholarship is going to be academic experience or scholarly experience. So you're going to want to, again, tailor that resume to whatever the outcome or the goal is for that particular resume. The resume that you see here that is mine is my work experience resume. So that first section is around work experience. And then at the very end of my resume, I have education. Those are the only two sections on my resume. Sometimes for high school students or even college students, we see work experience, we see education, we see leadership experience, we see volunteer experience, we see academic involvement. So those are some of the main categories that you might see. However they want to phrase it, totally fine. But again, we want to prioritize whatever the resume is going for. We want to prioritize the most experience that we can for that thing specifically, okay? Now, as we think about some of the things that are on the resume, you're going to get mixed reviews around this. So I'm going to tell you, as someone who reviews, I've reviewed about 4,500 resumes this season for the program that I support. Here are things that I look for. Action-oriented verbs. I look for action-oriented verbs. So if it says like led, it better be really quantitative in nature. I was the leader of something, or I was responsible for something. We want to think about things that are really powerful and action-oriented. Like I drove results for this. I formulated a strategy. I partnered with XYZ. So sometimes in my experience, the younger or more underdeveloped the student, the more difficult of a time they have with this, because they see their resume as a vehicle or as a way for them to get a job, and they put it very task oriented, as opposed to a vehicle of transformation to showcase and exercise their skill set. So we want to get them out of the mindset of this is my, stamp of approval that I need to get a job, and focus on the resume as a vehicle of transformation around powerful action verbs. If you have them search on Google 100 powerful action verbs, they will find no less than 3 pages of powerful action verbs that they can use. And that's a great way for you to connect them to their own resources, to be able to say, what are 3 or 4 that we can insert in this resume here? The second thing that I look for is quantitative bullet points. Quantitative meaning numbers driven. This is particularly important as the scope of work gets different and as the type of company gets different. If students are interested in working for a Fortune 500 company, or even more specifically, a Fortune 20 company, a large company, a global company, we want to see that they have experience doing things at scale. Now, at scale means many different things to different people, but if you planned 1 event versus if you planned 8 events, that's important for me to know. If you have worked with 20 people in an assembly or 500 people in an assembly, that's an important thing for me to know. This is also something that students will miss a lot, because they're like, well, I did it, right? I did it, so let me put it on my resume. But we really want to quantify as many things as possible to help to really give the full shape of their candidacy and add some color to it in a way that says, yes, they would be an excellent value add for whatever they are applying to. Now, on my resume, you will see actual dates, i.e. January 2022, or January 2023, November 2021. You'll get mixed reviews on this as well, but I do think, and I would encourage you to have students put some sort of date on their resume. Sometimes people will use like 2022 to 2023 or 2021 to 2023, whatever it is. A lot of the cohorted programs that I talked about before are based upon specific graduation dates, like December 2022 to July 2023. So those months are particularly important, and they may be used in order to determine a candidate's eligibility. Sometimes people abbreviate the months, like NOV. Whatever they do, they just should do consistently within the resume. But I would definitely recommend using dates to the best of their ability. And then I get this a lot. What goes on the resume? What goes off the resume? Particularly in like that freshman to sophomore year in college, if that's what the student's pursuing, what do I do? So first I'll talk about the college example and then the workforce example. So in the college example, we want to focus on anything that is prevalent, that is most recent. So sometimes students are like, okay, well, I have a lot of stuff that's college or university that's most recent. But if it's after their sophomore year, their second year in college, and it's high school experience, it should be taken off. So anything that is junior and above should be college only, unless they're really involved freshman or sophomore. They can feel free to nix that high school experience earlier. That includes their high school diploma. So they don't need to put that on there anymore because it's inferred if they're at college or university that they do in fact have a high school diploma. Now, for students that are entering the workforce directly, they do want to keep that high school diploma on there because the employer will want to know that they do have that. And the typical recommendation is experience that is over 8 years old should not be on a resume unless it's for a company that you currently work for. Okay. So if it's like, in my case, company ABC, I've been there for 10 years, you're going to see maybe some different roles. If they don't have anything else to fill the resume, they can keep it on there. But again, this is for candidates who maybe have lots of experience and need to get it down to that 1 page. 8 years is usually the sweet spot for that. And again, we already talked about this, but we really want to keep the running CV or the running resume so that we can just pull from it. It's kind of like a plug and chug. I always instruct students, you should have a running resume, and then you should have a resume for scholarships. You should have a resume for jobs. You should have a resume for an internship in your field of study. You should have a resume to get into college or university, or you should have a resume for a job. So really help them understand that their one resume is not just going to be their golden ticket, especially because of the online application structure that we have now. It's very common for a company or organization to post a role and see that they have multiple roles for the same company. You're not going to want to use the same resume for all of those different roles. Okay, so let's talk about interviewing. This is by far the area where I see students have the biggest gap. There is a really large opportunity gap in terms of the interviews for a couple of reasons. One, we've got a lot of students who were socialized to go into college or into the workforce during the COVID-19 pandemic. And as a result, they spent a lot of time by themselves. So because of that, they didn't get a lot of socialization. They certainly didn't get a lot of practice of face-to-face communication. So sometimes the interviews have a lot of swings and misses, is what I'll say. Now, largely in the workforce, if they are going into a workforce job directly out of high school, the chances that they will interview in person is very high. They will interview in person because they're going to be working in the area that they're in. So because of that, they're going to be traveling to wherever they're going and interviewing with a manager or interviewing with a recruiter or something in person. Now, our students that are going to college and university and then looking for an internship or something similar, chances that they're interviewing in person are actually very slim. A recent study from Veris Insights came out and said that 85% of employers are only doing virtual interviews to hire for full-time and summer internships. So that means that students are never being in a situation where they're face-to-face with another person where they can actually like touch them, okay? There's also another very common method of interviewing, which is a one-way interview. Sometimes it's called a hire view, which is where I am recording my answers and someone else is watching it on their own time. It's like an asynchronous type deal, kind of like if you were to take an online class. So that is also very prevalent, particularly in that college or university space as a student is looking for an internship or a practicum experience. So I want to provide some insight. First, as we're coaching students through the interview process, they should know what type of interview they have, okay? So some common ones are, I know it's a one-way interview, i.e. I'm pre-recording, or I know it's a two-way interview. That's a first great question to ask them. Second is it virtual or in person? And then the third would be, is it behavioral or technical? Now, this is going to be prevalent in both scenarios, both workforce and college or university, but the behavioral is really that situationally based questions. Tell me about a time when. We're going to go over that in just a little bit. But the technical questions are going to be for your students that are pursuing STEM, like science, technology, engineering, math, machine learning, AI, anything related to where they would have to have a technical skill set. So those are going to be the three questions they want to get clarity on. Is it virtual or in person? Is it one way or two way? And the third question being, is it behavioral or technical? I would recommend that the students leverage the STAR method regardless of what it is. That is situation, task, action, and result. It is a formula that I coach students on all the time in order to be most effective in the ways in which they will answer. A lot of students get really rambly. They also get really nervous, and as a result, get really rambly and kind of pie in the sky, if you will. So the situation, task, action, result helps the interviewer be able to conceptualize if they would be a value add for the program or for the job that they're interviewing for. So I'm going to give an example on the next slide here and kind of walk through that. But before we move on to that, in the interview section, we want to make sure that we're focusing on what is the candidate's value add. Sometimes people refer to this as like fit. As a recruiter, I personally don't use this language, particularly around the landscape of our workforce changing. We have lots of different people with lots of different experiences, different lived experiences specifically. So we want to look at this from the value add perspective. What can the student add value to? Are they a great team builder? Are they very organized? Do they have great presentation skills? Are they analytical? Are they a combination of all of these things? So as you're coaching students through interviews and preparations for interviews, consider asking them, like, what are they really, like, what are they good at? What is their value add? Sometimes students are like, I have no value. Again, we really want to get them out of this mindset. So one way that you can do that is ask them, what do other people always thank you for? So if they're in a group project, what do the group members always thank you for? Your friend group, what do they always thank you for? What does your family always thank you for? What do your teachers always thank you for? They're going to say things like, oh, like they thank me for like being really, they thank me for being a great friend. Oh, so you're a great friend. What I hear is that you're an excellent relationship builder. That's a value add, right? So helping to coach them to understand what their value add is a great way to consider that as they move forward in the interview process. The interview process is the make it or break it. I cannot tell you the amount of candidates that I've seen that have stellar resume, awful interview. And it's not because they're an awful candidate. It's because they don't have confidence in themselves and are not able to clearly articulate what their value add is in relationship to that position. So you as a career counselor, as a career coach, as someone who is helping students navigate this, that is a really great place where you could plug in a way that could be really meaningful for them. Now, here's some examples of interview questions. I primarily work with students who are interviewing in the behavioral interview aspect. So the situations, tell me about a time when. These are questions that we use in my job. I pulled them directly from my job. So these are some standard situational questions that you can help to coach students on if you're helping, prepare them for interviews and they are in fact doing a behavioral based interview. I would say any like client forward, customer focused role is going to be behavioral based. Again, the only technology based or technically based interviews you're going to get are people that are like coding or like investment banking or something that's like really specific. So as we think about these interview questions, couple of things. I more often than not see students scramble the first time that they have an interview with behavioral based questions because they are multi-pronged. And because they are multi-pronged, the students don't answer every question within the actual question and they're missing portions. So as we think about this, the first thing I want you to recognize is that each of these questions has multiple questions associated. I always tell candidates, write out the questions, write out keywords for the questions. I, myself, when I interview, I say, okay, they said, tell me about a time when you're asked to make a recommendation. How'd you gather it? What was the outcome? My strategy for this is I put a 3 on a piece of paper and I would write recommendation, gather, outcome. What that does is that tells me if I start to get off track, I see on here there are 3 questions. They want to know about a situation where I gathered a recommendation, how I gathered the information, and what the outcome was. So that's just a strategy that I use. It's also what I help to coach other students on. So that could be something that you could insert in the ways in which you're coaching students to prepare for interviews. It's totally common. If they're doing it virtually, the interviewer will probably never see it. And if they're doing it in person, they can absolutely bring a notebook or a Padfolio or something, set it up right in front of them. Looks very polished and is a great way for them to make sure that they're retaining the information so that they can output the best answer possible. So again, these are just examples of 3 questions. I want to note specifically for question 3, it's formulated in the STAR method. So you'll see it's tell me about the situation, tell me about the outcome, what did you learn, what did you do? So you want to be able to try to leverage those things, again, to help students practice. If you are putting on programs or events or trainings for students for career readiness, a great way for them to do this is for you to put in 10 questions that they may be asked in an interview and have somebody pull them out with popsicle sticks or index cards or whatever it is. Have them pull it out, pair and share, and practice the STAR method. They can do this before assembly. They can do this after school, whatever works for them works for me. But yeah, just a great way in order for them to leverage this in a way that's going to really help to maximize their candidacy. So let's go over LinkedIn. This is the last one I want to touch on. And give me just a moment here. I need to go grab my charger. My computer is about to die. So I'm so sorry. Give me just a moment. Let me grab my charger and we're going to be ready to rock and roll.
And just a quick note, I'll share the dates at the end as well, but we do have additional sessions on interviewing and social media that will dive even deeper into these topics as well.
Thanks, Samantha. I appreciate it. All right, y'all. So we are back. We are in action. So let's talk about LinkedIn. A candidate's social presence is everything. Okay. I cannot tell you the amount of times that we have been in situations where we will see candidates' social media and they will talk about it in an interview or something similar. It can hurt them just as much as it can help them. Okay. So that includes things like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all of those things. I just want to focus on LinkedIn today because this is the platform we need to get our students on if they're not on. I work with a lot of high school students that are like, yeah, I don't have a LinkedIn yet because I don't need it. Wrong answer. You do, in fact, need it. So let's go through some best practices to consider around like their profile optimization. Okay. So I'm going to go through some of the pieces around how you can coach them based upon my own profile that we have here. Okay. So the first thing I want to focus on, this section here on my resume or on my profile, if you're able to see the screen here, it says aligning structure, capability, and culture to make people feel like they matter. Again, this is prime real estate. So students that you're working with may have something like aspiring financial services professional or college student seeking internship. I would recommend that they don't put, I go to our Lamphere High School senior, because that's already listed on their profile, right? So we don't want to duplicate anything that's already listed. Help them get really excited about what their tagline is. I always tell students, this is like your Instagram bio, okay? This is like your TikTok bio. Like, what do you have in there that you want employers to know and see? I think there's only like 12 words, so it's not really like a bio per se, but we want to help them get really clear on how they can maximize this. The second thing is their photo, okay? So the first one I want to talk about is the profile photo. The second one is the background photo. The profile photo, they should be using some sort of headshot photo. If they have a selfie in their day and age, that's okay. But the more polished the photo is, the better. So for me here, you see there's a clean background. I look presentable. So we want to focus on those types of pictures, not pictures where we're like cropping people out of the photo to get us in the middle. So if students are like, hey, I want to have a LinkedIn, but I don't have a profile, ask them to pull out their phone in your office, give them a backdrop of the white wall in your office, take a photo of them so they can use it for their profile. It is something that can help to leverage the profile. Now, the second photo on there is like the background photo. I did mention this earlier. I'm a speaker by night or on the weekends, I suppose. So because of this, I use a photo of me speaking. Now, sometimes people will use like a background of like their high school or their college, or they'll use a background that LinkedIn gives them. Know that the background photo helps to shape the candidacy. So whatever it is, just make sure that it's mindful and polished. Second thing I want to talk about is the About Me section. This one is particularly important because LinkedIn is a online platform. It has search capability and function. So in this About Me section, for example, I have words like highly collaborative, matrix-like organizations, quality assurance tools. A recruiter can go into LinkedIn and leverage what's called a Boolean search. That's Boolean search, which is basically just like a Google search. And they can say, I'm looking for someone who is results driven. And anyone who has results driven typed into their profile is going to pull up in the search. Now, as a recruiter, I would narrow that down very distinctively. But if there are certain things that the candidate's really good at, let's give an example. If they're going to be a student athlete, this is a great one. About me, I'm a student athlete. I source for student athletes, meaning I look on LinkedIn for student athletes and invite them to apply for our programs. If I'm a part of, I also search for things like Alpha or Inroads or any sort of like scholarship programs that are focused on students who have diverse backgrounds or who are underrepresented. So thinking about the ways in which they can optimize their profile, it's more than just about putting it out into the universe for someone to read it. In fact, I think it's very unlikely that a recruiter will read it if they do not pull into a search. However, if they are maximizing their profile and really optimizing it by way of their About Me section, when a recruiter is looking for, let's say, freshmen who are student athletes, they're going to pull in this search if they have in here that their graduation date puts them as a freshman in college and they have student athlete. They're going to pull in this search. So that's a really good way to help you get noticed. Number one question I get is like, how do I get noticed by a recruiter? Simple, easy way is to optimize your About Me section. Next, I want to talk about the LinkedIn, particularly around the ways in which they list things. Now, you are going to hear people who are telling you to put all of your bullet points on LinkedIn. You can let them know, today you went to this session with Nikki Joyner, a recruiter, and she in fact told me not to do that, because what's going to happen is your bullet points are sitting in the ether somewhere. They are not pulling in a Boolean search. And there is a separate search function for recruiters to be able to find people based upon what you actually do in your job. It is the skills section. So the bullet points are really just adding clutter. I don't know about you, but like in my previous home, I had like way too many photos and things on the wall. That is exactly what the bullet points are doing. So don't leverage the bullet points or don't instruct students to leverage the bullet points here. Instead, they should be leveraging the skills. So you'll see here, I have skills in each one of my sections here. Relationship management, candidate experience, establishing priorities, public speaking. When recruiters are looking for people, they are going to be leveraging the skills search function, which means they're looking for people that are public speakers, and they're going to say, great, I'm looking for public speakers. I'm looking for people who have recruiting experience, and I'm looking for people who have business relationship management experience. They're going to type those three things into the search functions, particularly around skills, and all the candidates who have all three are going to pop up. So this is how we help get them noticed by recruiting teams to optimize their profile. There is a ton of trainings out there on LinkedIn, things to maximize, things to do. You're going to get 6 of one, half dozen of the other, right? Here's what I'll say. We want to make the system work for us. We want to make LinkedIn work for us. And the best way to do that is to optimize our About Me section, is to optimize the skills section and all of the things that we have listed on there. And then the third thing is to make sure that we have really powerful first kind of area. So that's the photo I was talking about and the tagline. Y'all, I wish we had more time today to go over all of the things, but I want to be mindful that you might have questions, comments, concerns, or confessions, and that Samantha has some application here that we're going to go over around these things. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. I'm going to turn it back over to Samantha, and then I'm going to stay on for any questions that we might have and answer them to the best of my ability. So Samantha, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Yes, I do want to make sure that I get a chance to share some application pieces. So again, if you need to hop off right at 10 o'clock, this is recorded. So if you have a dying question you want to ask or a burning question, feel free to put that in the chat and we will make sure that those get answered as well. Let me reshare my screen here. All right. So how can we use this information that you learned today with your students in K-12? So first of all, like, why? Why is this important to be teaching to students? And we are going to talk about students of all levels, K through 12. So the first is that teaching resume skills helps with teaching communication skills. So like you heard Nikki say, your resume is really a very clear, concise piece of writing. You're not writing in full paragraphs. You really have to be able to get the point across very quickly. So it's a really great skill to teach students to learn how to write clear and concise. It also helps them think about how to organize and structure information. So again, if you're writing a resume for a scholarship, that might be different than writing a resume for a part-time job. So thinking about what information actually is relevant and needs to be included on the resume. Obviously, proofreading and editing is super, super important for resumes. You can't send in a resume with tons of typos. I was on a search for a president of a university who put the wrong university name on their resume and their cover letter. And so again, super, super important that we're making sure that we're proofreading it, we're editing it. It's the best piece of writing that we could possibly submit. And so therefore, super important in teaching attention to people. It also is a great method to teach self-awareness. So again, a lot of students don't typically think about what they're good at or what their strengths are. So by asking them questions like, what do others always thank you for, really helps them to reflect and think about their strengths and accomplishments and their skill sets that they are able to leverage in a workplace. And helps them really to think about what their unique contributions are. And I know that some of this, particularly in the job market that we're in, particularly in West Michigan right now, where we have employers that are like begging for people to apply, but it is still important that they have the skills that are necessary to do the job and that they can articulate what makes them, a good candidate for a specific role. And as our job market will inevitably eventually, shift back to be more competitive, really important to be able to think about these things and think about their unique contributions and how they can showcase that they are a good fit for a position. And then of course, the actual practical application, career preparation, but it also helps students think about how to set goals. So again, when you're writing a resume for a specific purpose, they have to think about what the goal of the resume is. What are you trying to do with this? And then finally, I don't know if it's showing up there. Sorry, my thing is in the way, but helps with persuasive writing skills. So when thinking about our youngest kiddos in elementary school, how can we teach resume skills, or why should we teach it to them? So a few examples here for you. So for me with elementary school, it's really important just to start introducing terms so that by the time they get to high school and we're saying, hey, you're a senior in high school, let's write a resume. They're like, what in the world's a resume? What do these terms mean? I've never thought about my skills before. So really just starting to introduce some of these career terms early so that it's not a surprise later. So, for an elementary kiddo's resume, doesn't have to be, the same format as your, eventual resume, but having them start to think about, okay, what school do you go to? What types of accomplishments have you had? What are your interests? This one, it gives them some different skills that they can circle. If you have a specific SEL curriculum you're using, or you have, your PRIDE or your ROAR or whatever your acronym is, that, the skills that you're trying to teach students, have those on there and have them think about how they showcase those specific skills. Another example I love is, thinking about, having students write a resume for their next teacher. So things that they want them to know about them. I'm really great at these things. I would be great in your class because of this. So helping kind of introduce what they think is important for a future teacher to know. A lot of teachers, especially in elementary school, will have kids start off with the about me poster or pictures or whatever. Again, using some of these terms in it, thinking about skills, accomplishments, interests, just using that terminology, even in those projects they're already doing, is a great way to start introducing this. You also can use this for things like if you have class jobs. So instead of just saying, okay, Susie, you're the line leader, rather, Susie, what are your skills? What are your interests? Oh, I'm good at directing people, and have them apply for these class jobs that might be a good fit for their skill set. If you have things like student council or like a student leadership committee or something for your school, having them apply for these positions, utilizing something like a very basic resume where they're talking about their skills and experiences can be another really, really good way to help introduce this. When we're thinking about our middle and high school kiddos, and I didn't share at the beginning. So my background is actually in college career services. So before coming into this role, I worked in universities for about 8 years. And right off the bat, when students are applying for jobs on campus, we're asking them for a resume. And so some of them are like, oh, I made it in my, 12th grade English class, or I, did it at some point, and they didn't really put a lot of thought into it, or they didn't really learn exactly what should be included in it. So that's why it's super important for me to make sure because obviously we have those kiddos, but also, again, as they're applying for scholarships or as they're applying for jobs right out of high school, super important skill to have. A lot of our middle school and early high school kiddos, though, don't necessarily have enough experience to write their own resume. So again, we could do some of the same types of things as we do with our elementary students, having them just think through skills and accomplishments. But another really fun thing is that they have them focus on others. So just a few examples I have here. If you're in an 8th grade history class and they're learning about the founding fathers, rather than saying, write a paper on George Washington, create a resume for George Washington. So you're teaching them resume skills, but also having them put in the actual academic content that they need. Having them do it for a fictional character. So if they're doing a character analysis, instead of writing a 5-page paper about it, have them write a resume for a fictional character. Even thinking about I was trying to think of science. Math is hard. If you really need math, I'll come up with something. But if you were a planet, let's say Pluto wants to apply to be back in the solar system, what skills would Pluto put on their resume to try to get back, their standing as a planet? So really thinking about focusing on others, taking a little bit of the pressure off of themselves and trying to think of their own skills. We do need that eventually, but when you're starting to teach this, how can we do it focusing on others and other information they already have? A few different formats that you could do this in. One, I know a few years ago, escape rooms were super popular, like the Google Form, Google Classroom, escape rooms. So having them, giving them clues and things to kind of figure out the pieces of resumes, having trivia games to help them learn it. Another is a group resume. And this actually could work in elementary school as well, but especially if you have a group of students that are going to be working together throughout a semester, or, in elementary school, if they have a cluster of desks that sit by each other, having them come up with their group resume where they can talk about what the skills of their group are. What is the experience of this group that's going to make them the best group and going to help them work together? It's going to help them learn about others and how they can work together, but also be able to showcase what skills they have. Again, you can tie it to SEL. So if you are focusing on a specific skill at different times, so again, let's say you're focusing on responsibility, this doesn't have to be a one and done thing. If you have, a seminar or a advisory period, or if you have a career class in 8th grade or whatever, let's say you're focusing on a specific skill, then tie that back to, okay, how could we incorporate that into this resume that we've been working on? How could I talk about the skill of responsibility in my resume? Also having them do peer reviews. So, again, the idea of parent share, or even having employers come in and do resume reviews. So probably more for our, upper high school students, but we can definitely help you have employers come in and take a look at the resume and give them feedback on that. Another idea, I think it showed up down here, is having them do kind of a choose the candidate. So again, especially for our students who might not have enough information to include on their own resume, give them examples of 2 resumes and say, okay, which one looks best and why? A really fun tool, I gotta back out of here. And this is linked in here, is the 6-second resume challenge. This is super fun. Oh, I gotta restart it here. But there's, tons of things like this out there. So this one, it says, okay, we're looking for an entry-level customer service candidate. You have 6 seconds to try to decide if you want to keep or trash this resume. We know that recruiters typically don't spend a ton of time looking at resumes at the first glance. So then it, literally gives you 6 seconds. They take a look at it. I would say, okay, why is your name Thundercat? You've got this strange picture on here. What's going on? Okay, maybe I'm not going to keep this one. And it gives you 10 different resumes to take a look at. So super, super quick activity, especially if you have computers available for all of your students. And then at the end, it tells you how you did, why you might want to keep or trash different resumes, things like that. And then here, just have an example of, I don't know why this is coming up last, but again, you were thinking about a fictional character, you said, hey, write a resume for Gandalf. What's Gandalf's work history? Maybe don't format it in a scroll, but you know, again, using the actual format for a fictional character or historical figure. All right, I know that was so much information in 55 minutes. Again, I'm super happy to help anyone that has additional questions, needs additional resources, wants a thought partner to think through how you can actually incorporate this. I know most of the folks on our call are school counselors, so of course some of this would also rely on the work of teachers and getting them on board with things. So also happy to help brainstorm some of those things. But now we will open it up to questions. Questions for Nikki, questions on the implementation, any thoughts, questions, concerns you have. Feel free to throw those into the chat, or if you want to, you can absolutely unmute yourself as well. Questions. I'm gonna wait a minute or so just to make sure. And sometimes it takes a minute to type. Again, feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions. As you're thinking through those or typing those, I do want to just share our other upcoming events. So like I mentioned, we do have a few other, and this is the first time we've done this kind of career preparation skill session. So please provide feedback on that. I know Nikki, if Nikki doesn't mind me sharing her slides, I'll share that. And I know she has a QR code. If you have any feedback directly for her, she would appreciate that. You'll also get the survey from the ISD for any feedback. We'd love to hear it. Because again, this is our first time doing it. We want to make sure that this is useful to all of you. But future sessions, so in December, we have one diving even deeper into interview skills. So Nikki gave us a great foundation here on the STAR method and different types of interviews. And we'll dive deeper into that. February 8th, we'll be talking about social media do's and don'ts, so LinkedIn, but also how do we clean up our Facebook, well, not Facebook, Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat and all of the things. And then our last session will be focusing on networking and informational interviews. And the goal here really is to try to provide examples for students at all grade levels, so K through 12. So please feel free to join us. A few other series that we have going on, our college prep series, we have 3 sessions coming up, and then our final session is specifically focused on K through 8 again. Our first one is coming up on November 7th, and we'll have a panel of admissions representatives who are going to be talking about changes in the higher ed landscape and enrollment management. So things like changes to test optional, not being able to use race-based decisions for admissions, the better FAFSA, all the changes coming to FAFSA. So we'll have admissions reps joining us for that. The Career Readiness Network, our future sessions up until April will all be virtual on different topics. So like November is on Michigan Career Development Model. April and May are in person. January, we'll have one on career zones in the military. And then we have 2 administrators in industry sessions that will happen that are specifically geared towards principals, curriculum directors, yeah, mostly principals and curriculum directors. You can sign up for all of these on the PD Hub, all available there and all up now. So please feel free to join us. Most sessions, except for those 2 Career Readiness Network, are virtual. So join from anywhere. Oh, I think that's it. All right, I don't think I saw any other questions come in here, but thank you all for the positive feedback. Again, we would love to hear any feedback you have as we try to make sure this is the best it can be for you. Oops. But I have my email address up here. So again, even if you're outside of Kent County, if there's any, resources that I can share with you, I'm happy to do so. If you need to get connected to your career readiness consultant and you're in Kent County, happy to get that connection as well. You will receive a copy of this recording as well as those PowerPoints and the surveys. All right, 10 o'clock on the dot. We did it. All right, well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Just gonna check one more time. I don't see any questions. Amazing. Well, thank you, Nikki, again, so much for sharing your valuable insight with us. Really appreciate you joining us so early in the morning for you. And thank you all for joining us.